All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Lean Whiskey. It's been 3 months, Jamie, but we're back for episode 39.
Yes, it has been a little while, and that's too bad. But usually it's because good things get in the way. But what's new with you?
The book is coming along. I don't have a copy to hold up yet, but maybe next time we do an episode, I will. The Mistakes That Make Us, Cultivating a Culture of Learning and Innovation, is done with the copy editing. It is going into the page layout and design process and proofreading. I think I'll have even some early copies. I don't have an exact date, but I'm saying early June. It might go on sale early June, but I'm trying to spend a lot of this time here on marketing, prep work, and advance and everything.
Awesome. That's a huge hurdle. Obviously, getting the book, written and off to editing is the big milestone for the author. And I'll say for me, it didn't feel like it because there was still a lot of work to be done and
Yep.
a long time to go. But yeah, you certainly know the accomplishment of that and celebrated the book. The book is done and almost ready for release. So
Well,
it's a fun story. Just taking all these lessons from the podcast series, my favorite mistake, and then generating the lessons learned and making it into a teachable point of view, which is interestingly not it's not about lean. It is perhaps born with lean thinking and lean adjacent,
lean
but
adjacent is what I was going to say. Yep.
yeah, but certainly not just here's a lean
Yep.
tool or topic that you're trying to promote. So
Yeah, there's some lean elements, some psychological safety concepts, which do have some connections to Toyota. I'm going to be talking about
yeah.
that at Kinexicon, the Kinexus User
Connexicon.
Conference, the end of May. For anyone,
Excellent. Yes, I've been to Kinexicon. I don't remember if it was called Kinexicon
it
then.
was not called that yet. Yeah.
Okay, so I've been to the user conference. How about that?
Yeah, goes by both names, but I'll be giving a talk. And then I was going to mention when you talk about people from the book and from the podcast and from this podcast, David Meyer, Glens Creek Distilling. I had a chance to go down and see him recently. Picked up a couple of bottles of barrel strength cafe au lait. I was able to snag.
Nice.
And so went down and picked them up. And I'll put a link we'll put a link in the show notes. I wrote a blog post about the Kaizen opportunity that I discovered driving home, and a couple of bottles were clinking together. You put them together in a bag, and I wasn't mad about it. But well, the long story short of it is, I reached out and I said, well, hey, we're driving back, and I just kept hearing that clinking, and man, I'm sure there's a Kaizen opportunity there. And as you would hope a Toyota person would do, he ran with it. So we'll just put that in a blog post, and it was creativity before capital.
Yes, yeah, and that's exactly it. So people can read about it in the blog post, but not everything needs a fancy solution. So creativity before capital, a whole chapter in People Solve Problems.
Well, so speaking of that and that phrase, people solve problems. It's not just a book anymore, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it won't be just a book anymore.
Right.
So I'm going to do. I'm not going to try to keep up with the podcast history of Mark Graban, but
it's a podcast empire, actually.
Empire. Yeah, I'll have a little fiefdom. But yeah, I'm going to launch a podcast called People Solve Problems, just based on the book. It'll be sort of a short form podcast, 10 to 20 minutes. Talk with authors, thought leaders, practitioners, different folks about their views on problem solving, and hopefully hear. I mean, I think if people read the book, they should know that I think there's not one right way to do it. So we'll learn from many people's lessons around problem solving, which again I think is a human skill, a strategic skill, a core skill for any field. So yeah, I'm going to start recording in about a month. I'm going to start getting invites out for participants probably tomorrow, and yeah, excited to do a different project and just see how it goes. I don't know if we'll have 10 episodes or 500 like Mark has. So
It's getting close to 500 on Lean Blog interviews, which is kind of
getting real close.
in the
Yeah,
470s now.
awesome.
I mean, I have to think about something. Boy, I think it'll come at this pace next year. Okay, well, for another time, what to do with episode 500? We're gonna have to throw a big party.
We'll brainstorm that. I'll help. So
Big party at a distillery somewhere. People are welcome to come.
yes.
Okay.
So yeah, you mentioned David Meyer, who's probably the most mentioned person on this podcast, as
Mhm.
it is the ultimate lean whiskey. But we aren't drinking, as much as we do talk about him. And Glens Creek, we're not drinking his stuff today.
Nope.
We picked it. You'd think at episode 39 that we'd run out of themes, but turns out no.
No.
No. So a fresh theme for today is sourced juice. Basically, when distilleries don't, or I should say, whiskey labels, companies do not distill their own juice, their own whiskey. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Starting with you buy some juice to blend with your own,
Mhm.
which is at one level. There's others that they blend their own, so they'll buy a bunch of other whiskey and blend, and others will buy it pre-blended and just stick it in a bottle. So they
Mhm.
taste it, they select it, but they just stick
Right.
it in a bottle and put their label on it. So
There could be secondary aging that's happening
right, it could be
before or
secondary
after
aging.
blending.
So yeah, not just blending. There can be some extra aging, even if it's just for a portion of
Mhm.
what you're buying that's sourced.
Yeah.
And there's some distilleries that open. Obviously, if you're doing higher end whiskey, it's really hard to open up your doors and you can't sell anything for 4 years. Right? That's quite the challenge.
Right.
Not many people have a business model that works that way, so they buy source juice for several years and then they phase that out and phase in their own stuff as after it's aged.
Yeah. Well, with bourbon, I mean, it depends on how. I mean, how aggressive you want to be. Like some people put out product that's 2 years aged. Scotland has the longer requirement.
Right.
Exactly how many years? It's harder to do that there. But yeah, boy, it's a complicated supply chain sometimes. And Dave Meyer distills most of what he's selling, but he buys some rye.
Yep.
I think his rye ski, or there's some stuff that's been sourced. But Dave's not, he's not the example of a distillery that's been open. He's been open, what, 7 years? If he was selling a 20-year whiskey, they're like, well, clearly that's sourced.
Right.
There were some places, I had some Augusta Distilling from Kentucky. They're brand new. They're not producing anything yet, but they released a 20 and 23-year-old bourbon on Buckner's. So, there's skill, I guess, different skill in finding and procuring and selecting and whatever. But I don't care. Like, to me, I don't care if it's sourced. Just no BS. Like, just disclose it. It's okay.
Yeah, and there's some, obviously requirements around labeling. So, it has to say at least where it was distilled and where it was bottled. So, if your company's in Tennessee and it was as much is done, distilled in Indiana, then they didn't distill it, and that's pretty easy. And that one's really easy to figure out who distilled it, right?
If it's Indiana, MGP.
MGP is the provider, right, of source whiskey, but not the only one, but the big one. And so, yeah, if you see distilled in Indiana, you pretty much know that's where it came from. But when it's distilled in the same town as a distillery, you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, people like I'll say the manufacturers, the producers, like a little bit of mystery behind some of their bottles and some of their process, either to help with the cachet of the whiskey or to prevent people from trying to backdoor their
Mm.
brand, right? So
Right.
Pappy, Pappy, which was sourced for a while,
Right. Yeah.
right? Actually, that was interesting. It was like, well, we used to make it, then we no longer make it, then we sourced it and tried to blend it so it tasted like it used to, just because the family knew the taste, and
Yeah.
now made in partnership or by Buffalo Trace, and
Yeah.
so people buy up Buffalo Trace products thinking, oh, it's just a cheap way to get, Pappy, which
Yeah.
isn't true, of course, but
Yeah.
it's the thought behind it. So
Yeah. But I had one recently. Being in Cincinnati, by the way, there are a lot of bourbon aficionados, and there is a group that I've joined. It's called the Original Greater Cincinnati Bourbon Society, and they do monthly meetings. And this is where people from distilleries come in and present and share and taste. But people bring bottles to share, and somebody brought one from a distillery called Green River. And so I always like to check out. I was just like, well, what's the bottle say? And what's the story? And in like the tiniest of tiny lettering on the back of the bottle, like gold foil print hidden in like a green background. I'm like, it's distilled and bottled by this company. I'm like, that usually people are hiding the sourced nature of it, and they're trumpeting. It's like, we distilled this. It says so on big letters, somewhere in the front of the bottle. But
yep.
guess they
Yeah.
had other marketing messaging and information they thought was more important.
Well, and what's interesting is there's some whiskey companies that are probably better at marketing than they are at making it, and others that put all their energy into making it and
Mhm.
hope the marketing takes care of itself. And between the two, I'd rather have the latter. So I'm probably biased every time I see source whiskey. It like
Mm.
before I've tried it, I and it's unfair, but I probably give it a black mark before I've even tried it. But yeah, I think I agree with you. As long as they're not hiding it, then you know that's
Yeah,
okay. That's what they were doing, and there's plenty of talent in the blending. There's plenty of talent in
there's a
even
lot of
just
skill. Yeah.
picking a good barrel, right?
Hmm.
So you have these stores that do barrel picks of whiskeys that you can otherwise get. A
Yeah.
barrel pick of Elijah Craig. It's like, well, did they do a good job with a barrel pick? Like
Yeah.
that's a skill that's worth a few extra dollars.
There's a whole sub industry in Scotland of independent bottlers like Cadenheads and some other brands that are like really recognizable. And sometimes they're allowed to disclose where they sourced it from, and sometimes not. But like they have this access to get these barrels and like that name, even if you don't recognize the name of the source distillery. Like to me, generally speaking, that Cadenhead's name is a big seal of quality, stamp of
Right.
approval, whatever
Yes.
you might say. And maybe that's more, but like they'll have a whole store. Like here's a Cadenhead shop that sells nothing but their sourced and bottled and branded whiskeys. We don't see that here in the US. It's an interesting difference.
No, there's there is a company that does something like that, but I can't remember the name. So um, yeah, I mean exactly. It's the selection of the barrel is there's plenty of skill in that, and if you know they're good at it, then you buy a bottle from them, and you know you're going to have a good experience. So
Yeah. Now, like for the US and let's say Costco liquor doesn't have a standalone store that's nothing but Kirkland brand spirits.
right,
Similar thing with Trader Joe's. For me, that's been so they do a lot of that private labeling, but to me, like those have been more hit or miss.
yeah, yeah, and they're just they're perhaps selling to a different clientele that's not looking for the premium that means it's okay that it's hit or miss. So
Yeah.
um,
But I did see a Costco once that had something like, well, no, they had a really old, super expensive Macallan, but I think they bottled stuff and like it's cheap compared to what you would get of saying like, Kirkland brand 21-year age Scotch.
mhm,
Like,
yep,
well, okay, the price is low enough, you take a chance on it.
right, yeah,
Different source
absolutely.
whiskeys. So
So
what are you drinking?
so I'm drinking Holla Bourbon Whiskey. I don't believe this can actually be bought, which might be unfair, but that's just the way it goes.
Hold that up again. Is that a really dark label?
Yeah, it's sort of
Okay.
a chocolate. It's whiskey label, so it's brown, but it's kind
Yeah.
of a chocolate cover with a purple accent. And Holla's an interesting brand. I'm actually an investor in the company,
No.
um, and
Just
they're
disclosure. Yeah. No.
disclosure, yeah. So, but they're did pay for the bottle, but it wasn't a gimme or a shareholder distribution. But they're really they specialize in vodka and they do um, a lot of infused vodkas, a lot of I'll say crazy. I don't even drink regular vodka, but a
Yeah.
lot of crazy infused flavors, jalapeno, pickle,
Oh,
cotton
I see what they
candy.
did there. It's not not jalapeno, jalapeno. Yes.
Yeah, so they're a vodka company primarily and based in PA and distributes all over, but obviously has a stronger base here. But they did essentially a special whiskey, a special in this case a weeded 4-year aged weeded bourbon whiskey,
Hmm.
and I don't know if they're going to do more. Or if this was just a one experiment or a stepping stone towards something. You don't see a lot of the micro stills. You'll see do a whole bunch of different spirits, but you don't see Buffalo Trace getting into vodka, right? So I don't know if that'll go the other way. I did do, because it it tells you where it's distilled. It's distilled in Statesville, North Carolina.
Hmm.
Well, it's not. Google doesn't take long to find a Statesville, North Carolina distillery that does bottles or does barrels for other companies, and seems to focus on weeded bourbon. So,
Makes sense.
um, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. That this comes from Southern Distilling Company, um, and right on their website, they're advertising that they will make whiskey for other companies. But then it was blended and bottled by a company that does specialize in whiskey in York, PA,
Hmm.
for Holla, based in York, PA. So couple of levels: the distilling, the blending, and of course the bottling and branding. Um, I kind of got the impression it was a single barrel, uh, maybe it was, maybe it was blended. Maybe it was just blended or proof down.
Hmm.
Um, because I
I wonder.
believe,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a 90 proof. So
I don't know if I would call that blending. I would call it, yeah, proofing
no,
down.
I wouldn't call that blending. It does it say blended? It does say blended and bottled. So
But does it say single barrel, or you got that?
but it right, but it doesn't say single barrel.
Oh,
So
okay. Then
so my guess is, yeah, they picked a few barrels and did some blending on their own. So neat company doing kind of breakthrough stuff in the vodka space. I think they're trying to hit. You kind of have like high end vodka that has lots of brand cachet and price and bottom shelf, and they're kind of trying to hit the middle there. More accessible to young people and but good quality as well. And they use higher grade ethanol from both cane and corn for different. So they're not just it's all the same and they just infuse it with different stuff. They're really trying to think through their vodka production and make it right. So yeah, I got a bottle from their one batch. It's not a numbered batch, but their one batch. Don't know if they'll have another. Um, and yeah, that's what I'm drinking today. It's got nice color, as you mean,
Yeah.
our listeners can't see, but got really nice color, especially for I'll say a 90 proof.
Yeah. Is there any sort of no? You said 4 year.
Yeah, 4 year weeded bourbon. Definitely tastes like a weeded bourbon. It's got the sweetness more than the spice, and um, yeah, pretty good. I'm happy with it. It actually carries a little more heat than I'd expect out of 90 proof, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to complain about that.
Yeah. Cool. I ended up with I had two considerations. I had two on the shelf nearby that were both from Indiana. One, Penelope bourbon, which I think has had a lot of buzz recently. It's a 4 grain corn, rye, wheat, and malted barley, and it says on the label distilled in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Well, that's even more clearly. That's where MGP is located. Bottled in Bardstown, Kentucky. But so I tasted it, and I tasted the one that I'm doing for the episode here is also, it just says Indiana, but it is a brand called the Senator. It's a straight rye whiskey, single barrel, 6 years. Actually, it's like 6.5 years. So it's barrel proof, about 54% ABV or 108 proof. And then this is an example of a store pick. So local liquor store, small independent liquor store that we like here in Texas. It's one of their picks, and it just struck me. It's still cooler spring weather, relatively speaking. So like something a little heavier, a little spicier. With the rye, spoke to me yesterday, and still liking it today. So it's 95% rye, 5% malted barley, and you can see the packaging. I mean, it's very senatorial.
Yeah,
I guess, but yeah, it says bottled by Proof and Wood Ventures in Stanford, Kentucky.
okay.
Connecticut, but no, Stanford, Kentucky. But I like it, and I mean, it's silly to say this. It's rye. We know it says proudly made in USA. Didn't need to tell me that, but
No, probably not. But that's okay. But yeah, heck, even with the name of the senator, it's you're headed down that path, and yeah, that's a lot of rye. But yeah, a good 6 year, and we know MGP does
mm-hmm.
uh, they really do a good job with all their stuff. But their ryes, I think, do quite well. So
I mean, that's I think really what is highly acclaimed. So
right.
to back to the question of like, oh, don't look down on it because it's sourced. There are people who really look for these MGP ryes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and getting the pick of the litter out of MGP, and it's interesting. MGP has started launching some of their own brands.
Yes, they have. Yes,
small brands, which is an interesting choice, right? Because now you're competing with your main customers, maybe, right? I mean, I guess if customers feel that they can get from here to there and get reliable source. But from what I've understood, I think there's some companies that used to use sourced and that had a harder and harder time getting it.
Yeah.
Because all these companies have started, and so they've decided to distill themselves. So
yeah.
So yeah, I think MGP became almost too popular. And now that they're doing their own brands, you kind of wonder if that's their long-term strategy, is they're gonna stop providing a lot of source whiskey and instead just extend into their own brands. So
yeah.
We'll have to watch that and see where we go.
Yeah, but some of the brands I was just pulling up here: George Remus Straight Bourbon, Rossville Union Straight Rye, Yellowstone Kentucky Straight Bourbon. Those are MGP products, and then says popular products that are sourced from MGP, just to name a few. Well-known MGP sourced whiskeys include Angel's Envy Rye, Barrel Whiskey, High West,
Yep.
which my high west is Utah, I believe.
I think it is Utah. Yeah.
Joseph Magnus bourbon, which is outstanding. Whistle Pig Old World Rye, Willet Rye. So again, like some of these places, I'm sure Whistle Pig at this point is distilling some of their own. They actually buy a lot of Canadian juice.
Yeah, they do. They do. But I think some of their higher end stuff comes from MGP is the way that it works for Whistle Pig.
Yeah. MGP, Midwest Grain Products.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not selling branded products, you don't need a easily understood name.
Mm-hmm.
But
and I've tried to look. I don't think they do tours because it's industrial.
right.
I read an article. I think a journalist. Maybe we should try to finagle this as it's podcasters. But the journalist had an opportunity to go in. He said it was like the only distillery tour where, if I remember right, he was given like a high vis vest and a hard hat, and it would be like a factory tour, not
right.
charming little distillery.
No, they're very good at what they do, but they're not a craft. They're a producer, right? And so, like I said, we'll see. I think only because their product is wound up in so many good brands,
mm-hmm.
and there's so much between podcasts and magazines and other things. There's so much investigative journalism
mm-hmm.
In whiskey that everybody that loves whiskey knows at some point about MGP. So they're kind of like, well, okay, now maybe it's time to put our own brands out there. So an interesting set of choices. But
yeah, cheers to choices.
Cheers to choices. That's the beauty of whiskey, right?
All right. So then in the news, we're going to talk about some choices that a couple of CEOs have made and has been written about. So we can talk about, was the motivation to have this written about? CEOs, relatively new. Very new CEO at Starbucks. Relatively old, Uber's CEO has been there, like 3-4 years now?
Yeah, but
good research on my part. Sorry.
Yeah, but it's hard to say whether all the years under COVID count because were you running the company as it's supposed to be or just hanging on? So, but yeah, I think I should know that. I think he's been there a little longer, but yeah, the Starbucks exec is new. And
outside hire, yeah,
and an outside hire, which is actually its own surprise, right? Because the other 17 times that Schultz has retired and replaced himself, I think it was from all internal promotions, and this is the first time I think they have a CEO brought in straight from the outside. Yeah. So
Laxman Narasimhan. I apologize if I didn't say that perfectly correctly.
He might not be listening to this episode.
He's probably not. And but the thing they're doing, these CEOs, and what these articles are writing about, is going to the front line, doing the work, driving an Uber vehicle. Dara Khosrowshahi. Again, apologies. That's not the whiskey talking. That's just me not knowing how. So it's Dara. Is out driving Uber vehicles under kind of a fake name and a rented Tesla. And Starbucks' new CEO went and got training. I'll give him credit for that. Went through 40 hours of barista training.
Yep.
And going to the front line. But why and how and what are they accomplishing and what are they interacting? How are they interacting with people? So a couple of interesting stories, and we're going to link to these in the show notes. Wall Street Journal, about the Uber CEO, also about the Starbucks CEO. I think the Washington Post also had an article. So I don't know. So someone's got a line to the Wall Street Journal of like, hey, our CEO, he's just a normal guy. Write an article about it, would you? Like, I don't know. Was it the same? Again, poor research on my part. Was it the same journalist?
Oh, that's a good question.
Heather Haddon is the author, journalist of the Starbucks piece, and then the Uber piece. was Pratika Rana. So no,
Okay.
not the same.
But there's editors that decide what some of these articles are, so it could all have been the same person deciding. But it is an easy story to write because you want stories to uh, be easy to describe, and you don't get a lot behind the veil of what happens in the CEO's life, and so it's at least fun to write about, if nothing else. So I won't blame the journal for picking up the articles. And other people wrote about them too, although I don't know if they were all. I don't know if they were all picking up in the Wall Street Journal article.
Sometimes they're just derivative, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they're just
The
derivative.
article.
I think one of them, and I can't remember if it's Uber or Starbucks. I think it might be the Uber one, where it came out of notes maybe from an earnings call where they described it, and then people, or an interview, and then they all sort of iterated off of that. But
Kind of swooped in as opposed to a comms or PR firm, comms department or PR firm actively pitching it. Yeah.
pitching it. So So in the Starbucks example, there's at least a rhythm behind it. It's an intent. And again, he's new, so we'll see how things go. But both that he and other execs will all work 4 hours a month in a store. And I think, if I understand this correctly, from the article, that it won't always be the same store.
Yeah.
Right. They'll move around, go to different stores, take a shift, or take 4 hours. Right. Where I think Uber, and this has to be by a sample size, because again, he was always in the same car, so I doubt they moved the car around for him. I think he was just doing San Francisco, which
I'm sure that's what it was described. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of its own little market, right? It's not good or bad. It's just San Francisco's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, while it might be a popular place for Uber, I'm not sure it's as representative of the whole Uber market as maybe what the Starbucks experience is.
Well, but I mean, same question. If Starbucks stores in Seattle are probably not representative of their global stores.
No, and that's where I hope they're not all just doing it in Seattle, but it's not clear. They didn't ask that question or didn't include it in the article.
Right. But so I mean, you're bouncing around to different stores. To me, that begs all kinds of questions. I mean, I saw some online criticism of like, okay, you're working 4 hours. Why you don't know? You don't learn what it's like. I don't know how long Starbucks shifts usually are. Is that? But some were criticizing, well, hey, that's not a full shift. You're not getting the full fatigue factor based on the way the work is set up or designed or not designed.
And that's, I think, an important part. Years ago, Ford used to run a program, and this is like 1990s, where they'd have new managers or execs. I can't remember who all was included in this. They'd have to go work on the floor for a shift and a half. And the specific reason a shift and a half was that the key learning is what it's like to wake up a day after a shift, and go back in, right? Like, hey, I'm tired. My body is sore. I've done this what we like to call industrial athleticism.
Right.
I did that for 8 hours and worked really hard, and I'm sore, and I have to wake up and go back in and do it again. What does that feel like? And so they specifically designed it for a shift and a half with that in mind. But then, of course, I guess over time they kept the feature, but they dropped it down to like just 4 hours, right? Because it was like too much time to. But it kind of missed the point. I think it's really good feedback. If you're going to do 4 hours a month, why not do 12 hours a quarter all at once, right? Same time, but it's a different experience. To your point of how easy it is to make a mistake at your 900th drink or whatever that would be.
Yeah, I mean, a little quick Googling here said, consensus seems to be shifts at Starbucks if it's a morning shift, it could be a 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It could be an 8-hour shift. Afternoon shifts might be shorter. So they have, it sounds like a range of, 4 to 8 hour shifts, but working during the morning rush versus late afternoon is a very different experience. And hopefully he's mixing that up a little bit for the other
Hopefully,
executives.
you got to open, you got to close, right? Um, go through those experiences. I did a little bit of food service when I was a teenager, and opening and everything you got to do, and closing and everything you got to do, all makes a difference. And I'd imagine, certainly more so than a manufacturing site, and probably more so than less so than like a McDonald's is. It's not like they're all showing up at 5:30. They have a shift huddle and then they get to work, right? Because they probably only need two people to open, and people start coming in to start their shift on a somewhat a rolling basis to hit peak. So it's not like you can really start with a huddle and sort of almost be part of that team. You got to kind of come in cold, but then of course that is the experience for most Starbucks employees is they don't get a huddle. They when they show up, for most of them, there's people in line and cars in the queue. So
Yeah. But the other thing, beyond shift lengths and times and what's representative, I think of an expression I learned when I was working in the UK. The Queen thinks the world smells like fresh paint. Like, oh, that's such a great expression, right? Because everyone dolls up their facility and paints everything before the Queen or now the King is coming. So is the Starbucks CEO and other executives getting the real experience, or has everything been kind of specially prepped, including like if I was the store manager and the CEO was coming, I would certainly make sure my quote unquote troublemakers were not working that shift.
Yep. And I'd make sure everything was extra stocked the night before, and
Super clean.
I'd do a little extra cleaning, and I'd probably come in and work that shift myself just to be part of it and all of that. I think that now again, if you can sort of bias that one of two ways. One, you can kind of just know that it's always better than it always looks better than it actually is, and just assume that that's always happening.
Yeah.
Or you can find ways around it, right? And that's not easy. I don't know what it'd be in this particular case. Maybe showing up spontaneously and saying, "Throw me in, boss." But there's got to be some ways around that. I know certainly in manufacturing, we always found a ways to get around the show.
Yeah.
But I think you think about all the other ways that they might not be the real experience. For starters, like he's probably not hoping his car starts in time to get to his shift, right?
Right.
And this isn't his fault, and it has nothing necessarily to do with a Starbucks problem, but customers can be a lot ruder to a teenage employee, right? Because they're just like, you're some stupid kid and you screwed up, and I'm going to come down hard on you because you don't get me. And I'm sure he's not getting that, right? Some of that treatment is probably a little better for him than it would be for some employees.
Well, and not to totally jump to Uber, but Uber CEO was saying he was surprised he experienced how rude some Uber customers could be to the drivers in different ways. So that's different than right. So he's getting more of the he's getting more of the real reality that way. Unfortunately, it's sad. People are being rude to their Uber drivers. But I think bring it back to Starbucks though. Like, I mean, he got called out in the comments in the Wall Street Journal article, and you go and look at the picture in the article. He wasn't wearing like a black T-shirt under his apron. He was wearing a crisp white dress shirt with gold cufflinks, like way to fit in, like way to blend in with the crowd and to relate to your workers. It's like it makes me think of. Did you watch the show Arrested Development?
Uh, no, but I'm aware of it, and
There's a famous
probably
scene,
everyone
and
else
it's
saw it.
become this meme where the actor Steve Buscemi was, I think, playing. I don't know if he was trying to go undercover into a school, and he looked so like in his 50s and haggard, and he's like got a backpack, and he says something like, "Hello, fellow kids," and like it's just so a bad attempt to blend in. But that I don't know, like so maybe the Starbucks CEO
No,
means well. We don't know his intent, but man, he's not blending in with the crowd. And is he actually interacting with other workers? Do the baristas feel safe speaking with him honestly? And it makes me question, like, okay, getting in and doing the work versus going and visiting the stores and doing a listening tour. Maybe just doing a dang listening tour would build better relations with the employees, and he might learn more. Because I mean, I've heard the criticism of the whole, oh, I'm going to jump in and do the work. Is that, well, I mean, he went and did the training, but it could come across as being a little disrespectful that you think you can just jump in and do the work.
yeah, although he did the same training everybody else starts with, so
Right. But I'm saying more generally with some of the other
yeah.
boss type
But
scenarios.
and I'll give him I'll give him the on the gold cufflinks. Maybe they came in to do the story, and that day that's what he was wearing, and they're like, "Hey, can we run down to a store and get some pictures?"
Maybe
And I don't know. I
if
want to
he's
be.
if he's working in the stores that much, he should have a black T-shirt in his office. Just
No, that's and throw it on, right? I agree entirely, and they probably have one that they could have given him. So in that case, maybe either he wasn't doing his job or the PR person uh, running cover didn't do their job. So it's definitely I'll say a fair criticism,
yeah.
but I would say it's not. Um, so yeah, I think a listening tour is important. I mean, Howard Schultz did that, and I think we talked about it even on the show. Um, uh, I can't remember. I do remember the article about his listening tour, listening to baristas, um, and I hope he's doing some of that as well along the way. In the Uber example, the only time you really talk to Uber drivers is either um, online, right, in forums,
Yeah.
which probably have people that monitor the forums to find out what's really going on anyway. Or one of those Uber lines at the airport where you queue up just like you do with the taxis, where you get out of your car and you're waiting for the queue to die down. But so hopefully he is talking with the employees. I would say that looking customers in the eye, right, and handing them their drinks and taking their orders and watching them, stand with their arms crossed,
Right.
waiting for their drink because it didn't come out right away, or interrupting you while you're in the middle of making a drink. I think some of that interact with a customer is hard to simulate and hard to just extract from data,
Sure.
right? And so is it to get to know the customer experience, or is it get to know the barista experience, or a little bit of both?
That's a
Um,
good point about the customer interaction, perhaps. But like one thing that rubs me the wrong way about some of these articles, like, there's always some detail, right? And there was more of it, I think, in the Uber story, but in the Starbucks story, like the CEO discovered, boy, we've got too many varieties of cups and lids. And I'm like this hero stuff of like, oh, the CEO swoops in and notices this problem. Like, there's people in the organization who know this, and it's not the CEO's job to come in and fix it any more than it would be the plant manager's job to come in and fix something at the front line, right? So there was a Wall Street Journal comment that said something that I was thinking. The Wall Street Journal did one of these articles on the CEO of a food processing company, and he was getting into the weeds about the process and not wondering why there weren't systems to deal with it. And I would say that's the CEO's job.
It is, and
Make sure
I
those
think,
systems are there and
yeah,
communication is there.
and so I think the questions the CEO. So what the CEO does with that experience um, is I think important. So do you come out of there saying there's too many cups and lid choices? Now I would argue in that particular case that the cost of complexity is really hard to calculate in
Mhm.
most cases. You can do it, but you have to want to do it. You have to decide that I want to go study the cost of complexity and go do that work.
Yeah,
And so I'll kind of say that doesn't naturally come through the other metrics.
sure.
Um, should they have heard it? Sure. Do they know how big a problem it is? Maybe not. So there's perhaps some visceral impact from that. But then the systemic question is, when we decide to launch a product, how do we look at it as a portfolio of products,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Like when we add a cup size, um, do we automatically take one away? Do we automatically assess? So how do we deal with cup size decisions,
Well, it's
right?
America. The cups only get bigger.
They only get bigger.
You only add more.
That's that's a whole different problem. Um, and so in the Uber story, they kind of talked about. I was trying to remember the example I was thinking of, but just talked about sort of the what was the phrase? Just basically trolling for ratings, right?
Um,
And what happens when you turn down a ride? You really get punished
yeah,
if you turn down a ride. And I so again, you kind of go, okay, yeah, of course, nobody wants to get punished. What's wrong with the system, right?
mhm,
And so you should be asking some questions. Well, who does own this decision? What criteria are we using to make these decisions? Um, and are we doing that well? Right? Do we
yeah,
have the right information? Do we have the right data? Do we have the right criteria? Do we have the right method of experimentation? So I think where you decide to intervene, right, is super critical.
hmm,
Um, Deciding like, oh, I'm just going to fix this one problem for the store. No, right?
yeah,
I know you've written about Undercover Boss. I think
mm,
I've written about it. And oh, I found the one employee to promote, and I found the one employee to fire.
huh, right,
That's not why you do it, right?
yeah,
I mean, you should be asking, like, hey, what are we doing? Let's talk to HR. What are we doing systematically to find hidden gems in the company
sure.
and find them and train them and elevate them?
Hmm.
Because I found one and we didn't know they were there. So that means there's more, right?
Right.
So I think to that comment about, what should you be doing? I do think you can get curious about different aspects of your business model, your business system, your business culture from that frontline experience. But again, are you fighting the fire or fixing the acute problem? Or are you fixing
Right.
the business model or the system?
Right. So the thing about systems and diving into Uber a little bit, there were different questions that come to mind. Like again, like why does the CEO or other executives have to go confirm problems firsthand? So there was a quote in the one article that said that the CEO Dara and other executives realized drivers' complaints were valid. So the assumption was that the complaints were not. Like that's to me that's pretty messed up. Like why like there's got to be structures for complaints and concerns to kind of rise to the right level and get filtered around what's a legitimate complaint versus just belly aching. I mean, but when you think about what they need to be doing, we can look at some of the details about um, the the other phrase was the need to quote understand driver grievances. Like it all sounds so combative instead of collaborative. But when you ask Jamie, what should the CEO be doing? Here's the thing where I kind of laughed out loud is that Dara going out and driving was actually interfering with his ability to do his real job of being CEO. It said in the one article, while taking a customer to the airport one evening, he had to ignore frantic calls from his chief legal officer, who was trying to alert him that a hacker had breached Uber's networks. like, stay. I mean, this is a bad driving pun. Stay in your lane, dude. Like, be a better CEO and let people on your team create systems and technologies and policies that are better for your drivers.
Yeah, and I mean, at the minimum, have a break-in code, right? I mean, like,
Mm.
oh, if my assistant, I'm on shift, so call my assistant, and they know, whether to break in or not break in, and so if I see my assistant call, I'm making that up, right? But
I mean, is policy Uber drivers aren't supposed to be on phone calls while they're driving you? I thought that was policy.
I assume so. It hasn't been followed. I can say,
I mean,
but
he was trying to maintain his 5-star rating. So if
yeah.
he took that call and he might have gotten dinged in his damn rating. But
Yeah, that's one where you kind of go, yeah, I'm going to take that hit, and answer when my general counsel calls, because that's usually not good news, right? So,
right.
um, yeah, and I think in terms of like validating employee complaints, um, again, at one level, you kind of go, when is the system broken? How do I know? How do I know that they're getting to me?
Hmm.
And so going to see firsthand, right, is and interact at the frontline level at in some way, right, is a way to know whether you're getting a biased view through all the different filters that come, between you and the front line, or a good view of what's going on. How else do I know that all those filters and layers are giving me the truth? So you kind of at least just getting a gut check on whether you have the truth, or uh, you know uh, really getting the wool pulled over your eyes.
But I would say that's a different. Sorry to interrupt. That's a different system problem. If you're not creating a culture of psychological safety,
Right? No,
that's part of
it
the
is
CEO's
right,
job more than driving a car.
but that's a lagging. I mean, if you're a new CEO, you have no idea, right? So using the Starbucks example, whatever the culture was is the culture now, and it's going to take quite a while for a new CEO to transform the entire culture top to bottom. He has to know what he's working with first. Um,
Well, I mean, so I'm going to answer a question nobody's asked me. What should the Starbucks CEO had done? I might be more impressed if he had gone and gotten hired as a barista and worked for 2 months at barista wages as a way of learning the business and learning the company, and then quitting. And hey, look, we promoted the barista to the CEO, which is, but like, I don't know. But it comes back to these questions of like, what we don't know motivation, but what are they trying to learn? Why are they doing it? I mean, at Uber, the story really paints a picture of like there wasn't some sort of like shift in principles or beliefs. It was really more of like, oh God, we're having trouble retaining drivers, and we tried throwing money at them, and that didn't work. Surprise, surprise, right? So it comes back to systems. There was an article here that said, the Uber executives had the belief if they attracted drivers with money, the rest will take care of itself. Like processes do not just magically appear any more than policies or systems. And so that, well, is it cheaper to actually fix things than throwing $250 million in bonuses at drivers?
yeah, and so I think what are you really going to fix when you come out of that? I think becomes important, right? Is it long term? Is it short term? I think what you said, really the intent is one variable, but an absolutely essential variable,
Mhm.
right? What is your intent in going? Is your intent in going to show that you care? Is your intent in going to basically validate that the data you have is the data you have and its truth? Is the intent to gain new insights that might lead to shifts in strategy, et cetera? I think it was the Uber article. I can't find the quote now, but it was something around, hey, we're re-examining some of the assumptions that the business is built on, right?
Well, that's
And
good.
and so if you go and look around enough and kind of go, you know what, we've been operating on one model, and I think the model has to change. Where does that aha moment come from?
Yeah.
And it's probably not going to come. It's going to come from some interaction, whether it's with customers, with employees, with competitors, that's going to shape your thinking. So you got to open the aperture somehow, right? And there's a bunch of ways to open the aperture, and think more broadly. But if the intent is to kind of go look at the business model from the ground up and kind of go, what's true and not true, what's true that we thought wasn't, what's not true that we thought was, and challenge our assumptions, I would say that's pretty good intent.
That would be. That would be. But the article about Uber described how kind of a mid-level leader convinced them to quote understand driver grievances. It described a 4-hour Zoom meeting with 227 slides. That sounds like hell.
Yeah, I mean,
She made her case, but
unless the message was, if you want, if unless you want to have more 4-hour meetings with 227 slides, fix these problems, right? I'm going to make this painful for you all,
yeah.
and go fix stuff. But I don't know if this isn't really a corollary exactly, but right, and this goes back to intent. Is when Toyota was first getting into minivans, right? They took, and I forget whether they rented existing minivans or took their own prototypes, but they drove around the country, the U.S. for months.
Well, this was after the first was a huge flop.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yep, thank you.
Then they
And
went and did these things.
and then it was the whole intent was like, well, can't you just talk to customers and what did they like and not like? It's like, no, they wanted to hop in the minivan and experience living life in different climates in a minivan and get firsthand experience and their own unfiltered gemba experience. And so we take that as intent to learn, intent to be curious, intent to
Right.
see the gemba, see the true reality. And so is when if we assume, I'm not saying we do, but if we assume the intent of either of these CEOs is not sound, is it because they were written about in the Wall Street Journal, or is it because some of the other things like the cufflinks and the 4-hour Zoom meetings and things like that come along with it? But I, I would imagine that they did it. Maybe they have some good natural curiosity. They probably didn't set up like, here's the hypotheses I want to test, right? They
Right.
probably didn't have a really deliberate learning strategy behind them.
And it's possible that they could have good intent and really clunky execution, or good intent with some bad assumptions baked in. And thinking about like, what are we trying to do? Like, again, like the article, about Uber kind of glorified, oh, the CEO learned that the sign up process was clunky. Okay. Oh, the GPS had arrows for the turn directions that are hard to read in the sun. And like the team had never tested the app like outside of I don't know how you test a GPS app in an office, but like again, this idea that, oh, well, the CEO found these problems and this means these problems are real. I'm like, it's going to sound harsh, but what the CEO has discovered is that some teams are not doing their jobs well,
Which,
right?
which,
And
if then you, yeah, and so again, what you do with
what
it
do
is
you do?
super important. If you go in to fix the GPS problem, I think that's a miss.
Or if it jumps the queue of, well, Dara says the GPS is effed
Yeah,
up, so it gets fixed faster.
right.
That doesn't
That
fix the system.
yeah, it's here's our customer priority list and here's our Dara list. Yeah, that's probably not right. But if
Well,
he
sure.
says we I want to understand how do we test our design features in our markets because I'm not sure that that's sound. That to me is a good systemic question that would come out of that example
Yeah.
to say, how do we do this so that these things don't happen? Right. And I'd be okay if that was the outcome. If the outcome was we need better turn signal visibility or a turn graphic
Arrows,
visibility,
yeah.
to me that's a miss. If they say how we're failing to test our features in real use cases effectively, how are we going to improve that? I call it a win.
Right. Is it firefighting or systems improvement?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. Are
and
you
look,
just one more voice of the customer user experience that just, again, as you said, jumps the queue because you're supposed to know better? Or are you really using it to again, change the system, right? Learn how the system might be producing unintended results or just bad results.
I'm going to share a story that maybe I shouldn't tell, and this is 1.5 whiskeys talking. When you talk about the CEO prioritization, whether it's bugs or features in a software company, or I'm having a memory from 24, 23 years ago, we'll call it, the Dell computer. One thing I was involved in working on was trying to improve some systems so that there was less need for constant expediting in firefighting. And this is not a complicated system dynamics problem of, as you do more and more firefighting and expediting, the need for firefighting and expediting only increases. Spirals out of control. So there was this list called the hot list. Here are the customer expedited orders. The people are complaining, sales is complaining on their behalf. There was the hot list. The hot list got so long that then there was basically the Michael Dell hot list, the hottest of the hot. If somebody's complaint had actually gotten to the C-suite, I'm like, that's not really a sustainable way to run operations. And we were
No.
trying to fix some of the systems so they wouldn't have to do that, so that orders wouldn't fall through the cracks and now running at the risk of being late or actually being late. Now we're expediting and now other stuff is becoming late because of the stuff that we've expedited. And
yeah, it shifts the problems and doesn't really understand them. And so, if I were to break this whole scenario down to some of the components that we've picked apart, you got to get three things right. You got to get intent right.
mm-hmm.
Right? You got to go for the right reasons. And let's hope that Starbucks and Uber are not PR reasons, but they certainly leverage their PR in the process. And let me detour quickly here. Is that
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing wrong with signaling hope to, let's say, the Uber drivers that change is coming. Like, we're not there yet, but change is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of my signals to them that I do care. There's nothing wrong with that. But if it's only PR, that's a miss. So intent is one, execution is another, right? As you said, whether it's do a full Starbucks shift, that's good execution.
For a full week.
Full week. Don't just drive in San Francisco, because that's drive in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, right, and see what different markets are like.
Yeah.
So execution, don't wear gold cufflinks. So execution is number two, and then third is output, right? What do you do with what you take away from those experience? Makes I don't want to say all the difference, right? Because if you got to get all three of those right. And if you screw up any one of those three, it's probably better off not to do it. It's probably more harm than good.
Yeah. No, that's good list. I'm with you on that. Final thing I just want to add on any of this. If someone's listening and saying, well, hey, Graban, I thought leaders are supposed to go to Gemba. Like, well, yeah, they should. But again, to do what and how and why and in what way? So to me, going to Gemba has never been jump in and do the work. There was one other comment. Like most news online comment sections are a cesspool. Wall Street Journal, New York Times, there's an exception. Like if you filter by good comments, there's actually sometimes good comments, not necessarily debate, but good comments. There was one comment that sort of had it right and a little bit wrong. One person said, Toyota, Toyota executives had a saying, go see and go do. I'm like, oh, it's not really, like I've heard go and see. I've heard go see, ask why, show respect, going to the Gemba. So I don't know. We can guess answers here. Maybe a listener knows and can let us know. Did Akio Toyoda, when he was CEO, go work on the assembly line 4 hours a month? Or does going to Gemba for him and other leaders and the new Toyota CEO mean different things? Now, Toyota does have, I think, a good practice of sending people with management potential to go work in the factory at the beginning of their careers, right? So Asao Yoshino, whose story that Katie Anderson has helped shared, his story is in my new book and some discussion, from the podcast that we did. That's good grounding, right? To understand and learn, boots on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I had to learn how to tear apart and put back together transmissions before I was allowed to be an automotive engineer, as an example.
Yeah, stuff like that is good. But then, another commenter was talking about this, this idea of go in and do the work. It's called the Gemba walk in lean practices. I'm like, well, going to Gemba to learn, to listen, to be a servant leader, to identify system problems. Like to me, that's all way more important than what could be this performative, I showed up and did the work kind of thing. And like, think of another lean leader in the U.S. I'm just guessing. I think the answer is no. GE's CEO Larry Culp. Does he go try? Like for one, like it would really. No, he doesn't do frontline work because you've got aerospace parts and people have to be trained and certified and But I mean, he does go participate in Kaizen events,
right?
So that has a different purpose and a different intent. So I'm not so impressed with, oh, I jumped in and did the work. I would be more impressed with, I'll bring it back to the Toyota words, go see, ask why, show respect.
Yeah, and again, intent matters, right? And so, why are you going to Gemba? And so, people give generic. This is where I'll get critical of the lean community is because we give generic answers, like that's where the answers are. Well, to what question, right? And I think early on in your learning experience, you go to Gemba just to learn that that's where real information is, right? That's why you're going to Gemba, is to learn the value of going to Gemba. But the rest of the time you do it, you should have a reason you're there, right? You have a reason that what are you looking for? And it could be, system stability. It could be, a very broad reason, but you know why you're there. You're not just wandering around, right? And so you bring capabilities of observation to the table, and you have clarity of purpose or intent behind it. Right? That's how you do it well, right? So going to Gemba isn't automatically good. It's
oh yeah, I've got stories where leaders going to Gemba can be a disaster.
Yeah, so go to Gemba is comes along with 17 asterisks and footnotes. It's not enough. You got
how you behave at the Gemba matters a lot.
Yeah. So again, intent, execution, output. Those three elements. Still, every time you go to Gemba, you have to get all three. Why are you there? How are you behaving when you're there? Right? What skills? What behaviors? What words? And then what do you do with what you learned? And if I would argue that the only thing I really ask people to correct immediately is safety.
Right.
But the rest is like be curious, right, and ask questions, and then go look for again, what's our intent in being there, and is it fueling that intent
Yeah.
as we go forward. So
Yeah.
whether it's Toyota or it's Uber, there's a good way to go where the work is done, and there's a bad way to go to the
Yeah.
work is done. And yeah, we not we don't make a point of criticizing the Wall Street Journal, although it might seem like that happens more often than not. um, but it's really, obviously, the writers aren't going to know what we're looking for in this article, and so they're not going to get to maybe that level of detail. But we don't know enough, perhaps, whether their go to Gemba is good or bad. But
Right.
as you pointed out, successfully, I'll say, is there's plenty of red flags that either their intent is flawed, their execution is flawed, or their output is flawed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the intent of the writers is to sell subscriptions and to retain subscribers, right? So I found these articles interesting to read over my cup of coffee in the morning. And if I ever think like, I don't know if that Wall Street Journal subscription is worth it. And then there's these articles, I'm like, well, okay, this is interesting.
And here we are talking about it. So, right.
Yeah, and here we are. So it's giving us
Job
content.
done.
So thank you, Wall Street Journal. But final thing I'll say, let's say if it was if there was an article of he's now they're transitioning, but I'm still going to say Toyota CEO Akio Toyota goes and works on the assembly line, and he noticed that these two parts don't fit together well, and he got that fixed. And like for one, I would like that should not be something the CEO has to discover.
Great.
And even if Akio Toyota was going to Gemba to listen, and a worker was like, hey, look, these parts don't fit together well, like that's a huge system failure if that's not getting addressed and fixed. Like there are things where CEO needs to be a servant leader on for sure. But like a lot of the stuff described in these articles should really be addressed by lower to mid-level product teams and product owners, not the CEO. If the CEO's job is to be strategic, get out of the weeds.
Yep. We're on the same page there. I think the way I like to talk about weeds are weeds are information. They aren't there for you to pull, right? Mm-hmm. But they might tell you about I'll overextend the analogy. They might tell you something about the quality of lawn care that's taking place that you might want to address. But the weeds aren't there for you to pull. And so what you do with the information, and do you find the right leverage at the right level?
Yeah.
You still want to know about the weeds, but where your leverage is as the CEO is different, and you should wield that leverage properly.
Yeah. So Jamie and I agree on a lot of this, and we were talking before we started recording. Like part of my original concept for lean whiskey is that maybe this would be like pardon the interruption, but about lean and business. And like, okay, this is not an arguing show where we shout at each other for 5 minutes and move on to another topic. This is not ESPN First Take. Where, I mean, Stephen A. Smith says he never says anything he doesn't believe, but a lot of these shows seem to be sort of set up like, hey, Jamie, which side are you going to take? Okay, I'm going to take the opposite side. No, go fight.
Yes. Well, and I'm a big fan of a little off topic, but I'll go at a different cultural angle than pardon the interruption. Is I do love Revolutionary era U.S. Revolution history, and the probably the only thing we can say about the beliefs of founding fathers is that they were pluralists. Mm-hmm. They believed that more than one thing can be true at once, and I think you and I both take that tact, which makes it hard to have an absolutist. I'll take this end, you take that end, and we'll battle it out approach.
Yeah. It reminds me there was an old Daily Show bit people can go and find and look at the YouTube, but it was, if you remember, Steven versus Steven.
Yeah, I didn't watch a lot
It,
of. Well, I still don't watch a lot of TV, but
it,
I haven't seen that.
yeah, and this is when both Steve Carell and Stephen Colbert were on the show,
Mm.
and like the debate segment was just like, "No, you wrong, wrong." Just,
That sounds actually worth watching. So I.
go Google Daily Show Stephen versus Stephen, or
I think I will. I think I will.
sorry if I yelled into the microphone too
That's
much.
okay. As long as nobody's cars swerve.
The audio processing is supposed to tone that down a little bit. Sorry, but oh yeah, oh goodness, yeah. There's a. I'm gonna go watch the movies afterwards. That was
Well, well,
the classic era of the Daily Show.
yes, it was. Yeah, that's. I'll have to check them out. I probably wasn't watching.
Stephen versus Stephen. Hey, gratuitous plug for the My Favorite Mistake podcast. I don't know if you caught the episode, Jamie. I got to interview the guy who created Comedy Central.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
Art
that's
Bell.
pretty cool.
Yeah, so he had Jon Stewart stories, and they were all positive of him being a good dude. That was a fun episode. He had crazy stories about um, Al Franken and oh gosh, back when they would do the live State of the Union address commentary.
Mm, yeah, I can't remember who, but
Al
yeah.
Franken had a meltdown, like the way I remember it, like an hour before the broadcast. He didn't realize it was going to be a live show, and he almost quit and stormed out on them. So, my favorite mistake, Art Bell. He had some really good stories, and he had a story about the time Bill Maher wanted to get him fired. It was a
Wow.
marketing campaign that he did. So this guy had stories. He had a good book about the early days of Comedy Central. But
It's a world of ego, I have to say. I think there's very little that has to do with maybe what the customer wants, but what the ego wants. So,
all right, so
well, we've already plugged some podcasts like My Favorite Mistake and the forthcoming People
yeah.
Solve Problems. But as for those that get this far into our episodes, we we like to end with a fun question, and since this is all about fun, and I think we've used this question before, but time has passed, and so it's a good time to ask it again.
Yeah.
But a recent podcast that you've started listening to, maybe you feel good recommending. So, what do you have for that, Mark?
Trying to remember what I might have answered before. When did we ask this question last?
Oh, probably like episode 2, I think.
Okay.
I can't say for sure. It just feels like we probably would have, but
Okay. Well, anyway, so this is within the last year, a relatively new podcast for me. And I listen to every episode. I can't get enough of it. It's called Culture by Design, and it is by Tim Clark and Leader Factor. It's a podcast about psychological safety, and it is great. So can't recommend that enough. Culture by Design.
yeah, I've actually I don't want to say I stumbled upon it, but I actually just found that podcast, and I think on my last long drive, listened to a couple episodes. So I'll be listening to some more. Um, so that's probably much more lean adjacent than my recommendation. Um, but mine has been fun. It's called Stuff You Should Know.
Hmm.
And they cover just odd things that I guess they're not all odd, but a lot of them are odd things that they go kind of deep into and uncover. And it really feels like they are learning not during the episode, but they're learning in preparation for an episode. And there's been episodes, everything you should know about coffins, everything you should know about skydiving, everything you should know about playing cards, like things that you just, I know what a coffin is. Okay, well, do you know the history behind it? Do you know, and so it's it's been, I'll say obscure history and facts. Is very, it's an interesting title, Stuff You Should Know. There's probably very little in it that you should know.
Yeah.
It's probably
Stuff you want to know. Just stuff in hindsight, oh, I should have known that.
Stuff that you enjoyed hearing, but maybe not stuff that anybody needs to know. But that's the name of it, Stuff You Should Know. And the team that does it, I think they have some fun with it, and it's a good pair, and I've enjoyed the show.
Okay. I'll check that out. And then random question before we go. Have you been watching, I don't know the answer to this. Season 3 of Ted Lasso. Have you been watching it?
Not yet. I think I don't know what we're waiting for. I don't know if we're waiting for.
You're going to binge it?
We'll probably binge it. I don't know if like a weekend binge is probably too much, but I don't know if we're waiting for the college kids to come home, which we're still a month away from, or what exactly. Honestly, we've all been pretty busy in this house. That there hasn't been a lot of. I think whatever the last show my wife and I started, we're well behind on. So, but no, we'll get to it. I'm increasingly torn about Ted Lasso. As much as it's a good show, it has, I think, quite literally put back the reputation of American coaches in international soccer back a decade. And I'm not kidding.
People don't realize it's just comedic.
Yeah, I think they realize it, but it's basically been an easy way to just mock any American that dare coach soccer. So,
oh boy,
we've had a couple of American coaches at different levels. Jesse Marsh was fired from Leeds, which is a historic club, and Armis was a assistant under a couple of different coaches, been fired a couple times now, and both apparently earned, both within players and within fans earn a Ted Lasso moniker, and it's not meant to be.
No, it wouldn't be a compliment. No.
And so I do really feel, as much as this shouldn't be true, I feel it's actually put back the opportunities for American coaches in the international sport, which is a shame. But
on the plus side, it's made me a little bit more interested in football.
Hey, great! I'll take that.
The episodes have become a lot longer, so I think it's 10 episodes for a season. A lot of these are pushing like an hour long. So
yeah,
caught up.
I saw some random headline that said, like, why do these need to be more than 30 minutes? So I guess I knew that part was coming.
Well, you get what you measure, as some people say. If the contract is for 10 episodes, well, you didn't say how long they could be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm joking when I say I'm losing interest, but my team Everton is on the day we're recording this, lost 4-1. It's not good. We're probably getting relegated, and
I know what that means now.
Yeah, no, and exactly, they're getting relegated for the first time since the 50s. Historic club, and just a god awful run of a couple of years, and it really looks like no hope. So
yeah.
I think my family watches the schedule for when Everton's playing to give me a wide berth. It's not going well.
Well, and I did a search here. I was wrong. There are 12 episodes. The first season was 10. The second season was 12. Season 3 here is 12. So we are 7. I've been watching them every week, and I learned that actually they drop, as they say, Tuesday evening.
Okay.
Not Wednesday. So I've been watching them Tuesday evening. But all right, well, we'll talk about that in a future episode. How's that?
There we go.
All right.
All right. Well, cheers to CEOs who do the right thing on the front line, and to our blended whiskeys, and to Lean Whiskey Podcast.
And to our sourced whiskeys. Thank you to the sourcers and the sourcees.
Sure. That works. Cheers.
Cheers.